Hearing is on the New York City Police Department. I'm pleased to be joined by our speaker, Adrian Adams, and chair of this committee, Councilmember Yusef Salaam. We've been joined this morning by Council Members Caban and Marte thus far, as well as Hanks. I want to welcome Commissioner Caban and your team. Thank you all for joining us today to answer our questions. As a reminder, this is a government proceeding and decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent unless they are testifying. We'll be taking public testimony at the end of the hearing today after the NYPD testifies. Instead of holding one long day of public testimony at the end, we're doing everything day by day. If you're here today and you want to testify, you're a member of the public, make sure you fill out a witness form with the Sergeant at Arms. But before I go any further, I want to invite our speaker, Adrian Adams, to give her opening remarks, and then we'll get started.
Thank you very much, Chair Brannon, and thank you so much, Chair Salaam, for holding today's hearing, where we will examine the Mayor's fiscal year 2025 executive budget for the New York City Police Department. The Mayor's executive budget includes a proposed fiscal year 2025 budget of $5.83 billion for the NYPD. This is an increase of $72.2 million from the FY25 preliminary budget and is $21.9 million more than the FY24 adopted budget. The NYPD's budgeted headcount for the fiscal year 25 executive budget is 659 fewer positions than in the fiscal year 24 budget at its adoption. The proposed budget includes a restoration of $62.4 million at FY25 after the Mayor restored the July 2024 and October 2024 uniform academy classes that he had initially canceled in the November 2023 financial plan. Each class is expected to include 600 new officers, and 2 other academy classes planned for fiscal year 2025 remain canceled. As the Council has consistently indicated, it is critical for the city budget to be accurate and for every agency to be accountable within its budget for our city to be fiscally responsible. In this hearing, we look forward to understanding the effectiveness of departmental spending in the current fiscal year and proposed for the forthcoming budget year, as well as the decisions that inform and impact these funding decisions. Over the years, we've remained concerned about the NYPD's actual spending on overtime, exceeding its allotted budget each year. As of March of fiscal year 2024, the department has spent approximately $788 million on overtime, which is nearly $271 million more than the $517.4 million budgeted for overtime in the adopted FY24 budget. Repeated overspending beyond the allocated budget raises concerns about agency and fiscal management and accurate budgeting. The city's budget must be a reliable financial plan for our government, and it is important that the NYPD be treated the same as all agencies within an expectation to manage spending within its budget. Our city's fiscal health depends on responsible stewardship, and it is critical that we deliver an accurate, comprehensive budget that reflects the needs of New Yorkers and makes our city's neighborhoods safer. Achieving public safety for all New Yorkers requires an all-of-the-above approach that includes investments in communities that prevent crime and address root causes of violence. Our city's district attorneys outlined this imperative during their testimony at our preliminary budget hearing when they identified the need for greater city funding for programs that provide mental health interventions, housing, economic opportunity, and victim services, and reduce recidivism. This council agrees and recognizes the importance of these investments as key to public safety. They help reduce the over-reliance and strain on our police department and its officers from a focus where it belongs. Public safety is a shared responsibility, and it is important that our budget reflects that expectation. We remain focused on delivering the investments that will improve public safety for all New Yorkers. Commissioner Caban, we look forward to hearing from you and your team about the NYPD's budget and your plans to efficiently and responsibly manage the department's budget. Effective partnership amongst all stakeholders is the safety of our city. The safety of our city is needed for the benefit of all New Yorkers. Thank you very much for your time. I now turn it over to Chair Brannon and Chair Salam.
Thank you, Speaker Adams. We've also been joined this morning by Council Members Holden, Osei, De La Rosa, and Public Advocate. On April 24th, 2024, the administration released the Executive Financial Plan for FY24 to 28 with a proposed FY25 budget of $111.6 billion. NYPD's proposed fiscal 25 budget of $5.83 billion represents 5% of the administration's proposed FY25 budget in the executive plan. This is an increase of $72.2 million, or 1.26% from the $5.75 billion originally allocated in the preliminary plan. This increase is largely driven by $62.4 million to restore the NYPD Academy classes that were canceled in the FY24 November. The cutting and restoring funding is destabilizing, and as we negotiate the final budget in good faith, it's important that we're all operating off the same set of facts. In the Council's preliminary budget response, we continued to push the progress we've made in prior years to increase transparency in the department budget, calling on the administration to add additional units of appropriation to the NYPD budget to match its functional program areas. No such U of A's were included in the executive budget, and the Council continues and will continue to insist on expanding transparency in agency operations and taxpayer spending. My questions today will largely focus on subway safety, the police radio encryption, school safety agents, overtime budgeting, pension increases, and the FY24 general increase. But I now want to turn it to my co-chair for this hearing today, Chair of the Public Safety Committee, Councilmember Salam, for his opening statement.
Good morning. May the peace, mercy, and blessings from the owner of peace, mercy, and blessings be upon each and every one of you. Welcome to the fiscal year 2025 executive budget hearing for the Committee on Public Safety. I am Councilmember Yusef Salam, Chair of the Committee on Public Safety. Today we will discuss the fiscal year 2025 executive budget for the Police Department to understand the administration's budget proposals for an agency that plays an important role in public safety. I would like to welcome the Commissioner Caban and his executive staff. In the fiscal year 2025 executive plan, the police department's budget totals $5.8 billion. That supports 48,844 budgeted uniform and civilian positions. This plan includes large changes to NYPD's budget, including PEG restorations for uniform academy classes, increases to the overtime budget and various other adjustments, new needs, and the changes to the capital commitment plan. There are many important budget actions in this plan, and we hope to better understand them after this hearing. I look forward to our fruitful conversation with ongoing oversight hearings. However, we have a lot of work ahead of us today. I want to thank our Public Safety Committee staff for their hard work, our financial analysts, Owen Kotowski, Policy Analyst Chad Benjamin, Counsel Jeremy Whitman, and Senior Counsel Josh Kingsley. I also want to thank my staff, Chief of Staff Jordan Wright, and Budget Director Mufaza Hussein. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before we get started quickly, I want to thank Jack Story and Owen Kotowski from the Council Finance team for preparing for today's hearing. There's a lot of people that work very hard behind the scenes crunching the numbers this time of year, and we want to recognize them. My committee counsel, Mike Toomey, my senior advisor, John Yedden. And now I'm going to turn it over to the public advocate for his opening statement, and then we're going to swear in the witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to both chairs and the speaker for giving me an opportunity. My name is Jamani Williams, public advocate of the City of New York, and happy to speak at this important hearing. The NYPD is by far the biggest and most expensive police department in the country and is often called for social service functions that are not appropriate. The NYPD is often called to address issues of homelessness and mental health crisis. We know that dispatching police to remove people perceived as being homeless or experiencing symptoms of mental health and acute mental illness hasn't worked long-term in the past, and that we must invest in non-police responses to people in mental health crisis to address those in crisis and to help address substance abuse. The fatal consequence of what happened when police respond to a person in mental health crisis was exemplified in March again when 19-year-old Win Rosario called 911 while in emotional distress. As revealed in recent released body cam footage, the responding officers tasered and then shot Rosario 5 times within 3 minutes of their arrival, offering no help or attempting to de-escalate killing him. And most recently, the PD has been called quickly to forcefully respond to protests on campuses. In the past few weeks, we have seen aggressive policing and quickly called on college campuses in the city in response to student encampments, calling attention to the ongoing violence against Palestinians in Gaza, and then NYPD will continue to escalate. Further, yesterday, CCRB announced that nearly 40 NYPD officers are facing allegations of misconduct connected to protests surrounding the war in Gaza. I would be remiss if I didn't say I believe some of the regression is because the mayor and others do not like the voices of pro-Palestinian being risen up. And I'm hoping that we take into consideration so that we can lower the temperature when these protests are happening. I also would be remiss if I didn't say that the mayor has yet to mention Palestine or Gaza or a ceasefire since October, and I think it's troubling not to lift up the pain of everybody in this city. The CCRB has been continuously underfunded by the city, making it more difficult and in some cases impossible for the agency to provide oversight of the NYPD. Starting in January of this year, the CCRB has stopped investigating several categories of allegations due to budget cuts. An increasing number of complaints, 50% increase from 2022 to 2023, has outpaced the number of CCRB staff, resulting in backlogs and delayed investigations. At the preliminary budget hearing, the CCRB said they require 73 additional investigators and 376 total personnel to manage the current workload, with a total of $37.7 million in budget. With the current CCRB budget and its inability to impose its disciplinary recommendations and its lack of direct access to body cam footage, the NYPD operates almost entirely without oversight. I do know that NYPD has now entered MOU to hopefully get the CCRB that footage a little bit quicker. This is not only unacceptable, but also could be dangerous. I also want to point out that it has a chilling effect that it seems the mayor now wants to replace Chair Alva Rice for lifting up the issues of concern about the money needed for CCRB and for the pushback on the response of Kowalski-Trarick. The mayor's subway safety plan has exacerbated a police overtime surge. There are millions of dollars on overtime for police officers to remove people many times perceived as homeless or mentally ill from public spaces or standing around the subway stations. According to the city comptroller, for fiscal year 2024, the city has spent $461 million through December on NYPD's uniform overtime, $109 million more than spent from the same period, fiscal year 2023, and is on target to spend $925 million for the year. From 2022 to 2023, police overtime spending increased from $4 million to $155 million. There was an article that showed that the number of subway crimes stayed about the same and actually decreased in areas outside of the subway. I do know there's a decrease that's happening now, and some additional money has been put in. I would say it seems that the services of the police department are the only thing that we are able to continue to say the only thing we need to do is add more money and add more of to solve the problem. I always try to point out how it might look if we had the same approach to other agencies and other programs and relieve the NYPD of some of the social services that it's doing. Lastly, I want to say it's also vital to adequately and robustly fund our public defender services. While free legal defender services for anyone who needs them are mandated by federal and local law, the organizations are consistently underfunded. It is low-income New Yorkers who ultimately face the consequences of a budget that favors district attorneys' offices too often, deprived of the robust legal representation they need or deserve. In June of last year, the City Council sent a letter to the mayor asking for at least $195 million for legal service providers to be added to fiscal year 24 budget. And at the preliminary budget hearings in March, legal defense providers asked for $133.5 million in funding for fiscal year 25. However, the proposed budget for fiscal year 25 only increases funding for city-supported lawyers by $46 million. The city budget must ensure a high standard of quality legal representation for low-income New Yorkers. Thank you very much, and I hope that we all can agree We have to support our law enforcement to do the work that they are supposed to be doing. And most helpful thing to do that is stop asking them to do everything and hopefully join together getting funds to agencies and programs that can support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Public Advocate. We've also been joined on Zoom by Council Members Moya and Ariola, here in person, Lewis, Ressler, and Ayala. And I'm now going to turn it over to the committee counsel to swear in our witnesses.
Good morning. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Commissioner Caban? First Deputy Commissioner Kinsella? Chief of Department Madry? Deputy Commissioner Gerber?
I do.
Deputy Commissioner Snyder?
I do.
Chief LaPetrie?
Morning.
Deputy Commissioner Weiner? Bruce Separano? Inspector? Chief Rivera? Chief Aaron Bolas? Chief Beltran? Deputy Commissioner Stewart?
I do.
Chief Kemper?
I do.
Deputy Commissioner Parker?
I do.
Chief Kenny? I do. Chief LaPetrie? Oh my God, sorry, double. Deputy Commissioner Garcia? I do. Deputy Commissioner White? I do. Chief O'Hare?
I do.
Chief Benoit? Inspector Moulet? I do. Deputy Commissioner Barrows?
I do.
Deputy Commissioner Gamble? Assistant Chief Cosgrove?
I do.
Chief Iglesias? I do. Chief Obey? I do. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you. You may begin.
Okay, good morning, Speaker Adams, Chair Salam, Chair Brennan, and members of the City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Mayor's executive budget for the 2025 fiscal year. As always, it is an honor to share with you the outstanding work that members of the New York City Police Department do every day, and why this funding is critical to our core functions. The NYPD's mission is simple to state: drive down crime and keep people safe. That is our job. That is what every officer and civilian member of our department has sworn an oath to do. But fulfilling that mission and upholding that oath is some of the most complex and demanding work in our society. Fortunately for New York City, though, the professionals who do this work in our 5 boroughs are among the best in the world. These are truly remarkable men and women, people who have chosen to dedicate their lives to helping others. People like Detective First Grade Jonathan Diller. As you all know, since we last met in this chamber, our city lost a true hero. Detective Diller was a son, a brother, a husband, and a father, and he was also a great cop. Jonathan represented everything that is good about public service. A young officer with just 3 years of service, he already set himself apart, willing to help, willing to go in harm's way, willing to do the job we asked him to do. But in an instant, in a sudden and senseless act of violence, he was gone. Murdered by a career criminal with no regard for human life, who carried an illegal gun and thought nothing of pulling the trigger. Murdered while protecting the people of our city. This tragedy left us hurting, angry, and with many more questions than answers. It should have never have happened. And it is our responsibility to Detective Diller and to the families of every single member of our department to make sure it never happens again. That is our solemn vow. And that means continuing the work that Jonathan started, fighting crime, reducing violence, and ridding our streets of illegal guns. We are honored to carry on that work in Jonathan's name. And every day, your NYPD officers are building on a tremendous legacy of those we have lost. And our efforts are making a difference, and the data speaks for itself. So far this year, violent crime in New York City continues to fall. Compared to the same time last year, in 2023, murders are down nearly 16%. Burglaries are down more than 12%. And total major felony crime has fallen around 3%. At the same time, major felony arrests are up another 10%, extending a 26-year high. And major crime is down in all areas of the city, from neighborhood precincts to public housing to our transit system. Our officers are addressing the community's public safety needs at every level. And as we have said from the beginning of this administration, our focus remains on ending gun violence and protecting the lives of New Yorkers. To that end, both the number of shooting incidents and victims has continued to decline in 2024, prolonging the downward trend we have seen over the past 2 years. Shooting incidents have been reduced by about 17.5%, while victims have been declined around 17.6%. And these are much more than numbers. They are lives saved. Fewer victims of gun violence means fewer shattered families. And that is why the only acceptable number of shootings in our city will always be 0. We are not there yet. But your NYPD officers are out there in every neighborhood, changing our city for the better. So far this year, they have taken more than 2,300 illegal guns off our streets and out of the hands of violent criminals. Add this to the incredible work done since 2022, and this administration has seized nearly 16,000 guns. Every gun we take makes our neighborhood safer and will never again be used to harm another innocent person. So from our sector cops, field intelligence officers, the Gun Violence Suppression Division, Detective Bureau, our community response teams, and so many more, we are all united in this effort and relentless in this work. The people we serve demand it. They deserve it. And their cops are doing everything they can to deliver it. The same goes for our city subways. New York's transit system is the largest in the nation, with a fleet of nearly 6,700 train cars running through more than 470 stations across 665 miles of mainland track. The system has about 4 million riders daily, which for context is greater than the population of Los Angeles, and every single one of them deserves to be safe. So whenever there is an uptick in transit crime, our department will respond, and that is exactly what we did. We deploy thousands of additional cops into the system every day, on top of the amazing work done by our Transit Bureau personnel. These officers conduct train runs, platform sweeps, and station inspections. They are posted at turnstiles and other points of entry. And their presence not only makes our system safer, it makes our riders feel safer too. And now, paced by double-digit reductions over the past few months, crime in our transit system is down more than 4% for this year. We are committed to turning this around, and there's no real mystery how. It is all about the cops. None of this happens by accident. It is the direct result of the unmatched dedication of your NYPD officers. They truly are the very best, and the work they are doing in the face of today's many challenges is further proof of that. These days, our world is more connected than ever before, and once again, we are seeing how events halfway around the globe have a direct impact on New Yorkers. We are dealing with international conflicts, weekly mass protests, the dual threats of domestic and international terrorism, and housing and services for new migrants, to name a few. And all this is on top of the day-to-day job of fighting traditional crime in the largest city in the nation. This directly impacts our personnel and patrol resources, which then affects every other element of our work. Despite this, your cops are always out there, wherever and whenever they are needed. It should be clear that the NYPD fully supports the constitutional rights of peaceful protests, but we will never tolerate assaults on our officers, the destruction of property, public or private, or disruption of emergency services. And anyone who uses the cover of peaceful demonstration to mask criminal behavior will be held accountable. Why? Because we have a sworn duty to ensure that all New Yorkers can exercise their constitutional right to free speech. Our job is to protect that right, but it's also our duty to protect the rights of residents trying to get around their neighborhoods, the rights of small businesses to operate safely, and the rights of people to get to work, school, and anywhere else they need to be. The vast majority of protesters understand this, and we work closely with them on a daily basis to ensure that their voices are heard, that they are protected while exercising those rights, and that the needs of their neighbors are respected. It is all a part of providing the highest levels of public safety for anyone and everyone in our city. And again, it does to work 24/7. They are the constant. They drive positive change, and they keep our city safe. More than 90% of our department's budget is allocated to personnel, and that is very purposeful. It may be a cliche, but it is no less true. You get what you pay for. And part of what you pay for is one of the most diverse police departments in the country. With every new class of police recruits, the NYPD is looking more and more like the people and the communities we serve. From recruits to bureau chiefs, our officers come from every corner of the world. They are the children of immigrant families, and oftentimes, they're immigrants themselves. They speak hundreds of different languages, represent all races and ethnicities, and span many religions, cultures, and creeds. In every way, our cops reflect the people they protect. And more, our officers are New Yorkers themselves. Since I became police commissioner in 2023, and this matters because no one knows the neighborhood better than the people who live, work, and visit here. And I promise you, as long as my team is in place, this commitment to diversity in our ranks will never change. Our ability to recruit and maintain this diversity stems directly from our community engagement efforts, which has never been more valuable to the work we do. From our schools to our senior centers, the NYPD is heavily invested in programs designed to bring police and the people they serve closer together. Our relationship with the public must be strong, and it must be open and honest. So at every level of our department, we work to communicate and keep lines of dialogue open. After all, public safety is a shared responsibility. We are all in this together, and I know the members of this council understand that, and we truly appreciate the ways you support the men and women of the NYPD. Taking a closer look at the figures when it comes to the mayor's executive budget. The NYPD's fiscal year 2025 expense budget is approximately $5.8 billion, with $5.3 billion, or 92%, allocated for personnel costs. The remaining $446 million, or 8%, is dedicated to non-personnel costs, including technology that provides officers with immediate access to critical safety equipment, tools, and applications. Our agency authorized headcount is 48,844 positions, of which 35,001 are uniformed members of the service and 13,843 are civilian. The key highlight of the executive financial plan for the department was the restoration of 2 additional recruit classes out of the 5 classes that were reduced in the November financial plan. The NYPD is still down approximately 8% from our pre-COVID active uniform headcount, and the reinstatement of these July and October 2024 classes will help us offset attrition and keep driving down crime in the city. Another key addition to the department's budget for fiscal year 2024 was the $160 million in overtime funding, primarily for migrant shelter security, enhanced transit safety, and deployment to protests. These are unprecedented events which no one could have planned for, and as a result, spending for these activities is outside of our adoption financial plan baseline. We are closely monitoring these figures internally with the Office of Management and Budget on a month-to-month basis. Other changes in the financial plan include approximately $28 million for support and licensing costs for critical IT infrastructure, $9 million for auto parts to make critical repairs to our fleet, out-year funding for new leases for Detective Bureau functions, and collective bargaining and managerial wage increases. And at the start of my testimony, I talked about how challenging our work can be, and that is certainly true. But no matter the challenge, the NYPD will always work to find a solution. And at the end of the day, there's a thread running through all of this. It's not policy innovation. It's not cutting-edge technology. It is not updated procedure. It is the cops. It is the officers on patrol, on post, working in our communities. It is the people who have made a very important choice to dedicate their lives to the service of others. And it is an undisputed fact that our city is safer because of them. This may sound simple in theory, can be incredibly complex in practice, but what is not difficult to undersee or understand, because it's right there in front of you every day, is the commitment our officers have to the people of this city. The NYPD has been out there for nearly 180 years, and we will stay out there as long as the people of New York City need us. I know our conversation today will be wide-ranging, but you should never lose that thread. Our cops make all the difference, and the best and most effective way to keep New York City safe is a fully staffed, well-funded New York City Police Department. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak with you on behalf of the dedicated men and women of the NYPD. At this time, we welcome your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Caban. I'm now going to turn it to Speaker Adams for her question.
He's a liar. You don't keep us safe. You waste our money, billions of dollars every year. For what? You don't keep us safe. Our communities keep us safe. All you do is harass and brutalize.
Yeah, can we have her removed, please?
You don't keep us safe. Your hands off me, asshole.
Just a reminder about decorum in this hearing. We've got a long day here. The squeaky toys that we're squeaking, if I keep hearing them, I'm going to ask to have you removed. We're trying to have a government hearing here. There's time later for public testimony. You could sign up to testify then, but until then, if you're not testifying, if you're not on the dais, I need everyone to be quiet. We've also been joined by council members Joseph, Carr, Hudson, and Stevens, and Councilmember Nurse, and now I'm going to turn it over to Speaker Adams for her questions.
Thank you very much, Chair Brennan. Welcome again to the hearing today. I'm going to jump into everybody's favorite topic. We should just kind of say it in unison, overtime. So let's get right to it. The executive plan includes an additional $160 million for NYPD's overtime costs in the current fiscal year. This addition, along with funding added in other plans and through other sources, brings the NYPD overtime budget to $961 million in fiscal year 2024, which is approximately 15% of the agency's total budget. As of March, the actual overtime spending is approximately $788 million, or 81% of the modified budget. This is another year in which the NYPD spending has surpassed the adopted overtime budget by a significant margin. At the preliminary budget hearing, the department explained how it was holding supervisors accountable for excessive reliance on overtime by holding biweekly meetings with bureau heads to identify areas of overspending and patterns. Yet, the executive budget continues the pattern of adding substantial funds for unbudgeted overtime. Do you believe your overtime control measures are undermined by the fact that overall overtime spending grows throughout the year and remains under budgeted in the financial plan?
Good evening, Speaker Adams, Commissioner Kinsella. So you're right to a certain degree. This past December, we were put reductions over all our bureau heads. We really focused on 3 core areas.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sergeant at Arms, I'm going to ask, if you're not signed up to testify, I want to clear the chamber. Okay. If there's one more outburst, we're going to completely clear the chamber, save for those who are testifying.
Thank you. We really focused on,
That's it. If you're not testifying, you have to leave.
This bears a strategic response group. Public comment is shared. This is my public comment.
Sergeants at Arms, can you clear the chambers, please? If you're not testifying, you have to leave. Thank you. Commissioner, just give us a second.
yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Sergeants. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So we really focused on 3 core areas of our spending, which was arrests, operational, and investigatory. We have, like you said, Speaker Adams, we did put multiple layers of oversight in place, like we spoke about earlier in the year. However, we're happy to, as the positive results, we are seeing it in just 3 short months. In all 3 combined categories, we've seen a reduction that equates to $5.7 million. In the arrest overtime, we have seen a reduction by 7%, and that is due to more streamlining our arrest processing times. And in our investigatory overtime, we have seen a 6% reduction in overtime. However, their caseload did increase by 18,000 cases. But by far, our biggest reduction is our operational overtime. In 3 short months, we have reduced our budget with the overtime, operational overtime, by $4.1 million. So, Speaker Adams, we are trying to trend in the proper direction and downward. And for any further analysis, I have Deputy Commissioner Snyder to answer the questions.
Thank you.
So good morning, Speaker Adams, Chair Salam, Chair Brannon. I look forward to answering your budget questions today in my very new role. So I watched the exec hearing. I'm listening to your testimony. I think some distinctions need to be made in our overtime budget, a framework, so we can have some insight and a real conversation. So the first thing I want to clarify is that we're on the same page with spend. You mentioned $788 million in your testimony. We show $792 million at the end of March. For our adoption budget, uniform and civilian is $554 million. Uniform only is $513. So I just want to make those clarifications. So financially, the department looks at its overtime budget in 3 parts. The first is our core overtime. That's arrests, investigations, operational, our crime lab, all of those core operations of the department. And our adopt overtime budget supports that historically. It's for those things, it's city tax levy. And right now, our fiscal year-to-date spend is 62% or $493 million dedicated to that part. The second part, which the adoption budget does not include, is all of our grant and reimbursable overtime. That budget for, federal, state, other categorical, intracity, that gets loaded over the year. And it's not city tax levy, so you don't see that at the beginning of the year. So fiscal year 24 to date, that represents 14% or $113 million of overtime. That is not a city tax levy burden. The third part, which I think is really important and where we're seeing the adjustments in the financial plans, is the unfunded overtime projects, if you will, for lack of a better word, asylum seeker coverage, enhanced transit, protests, unplanned events. That's spend that was never baked into our historical adopt baseline. So what we're doing is we're on a month-to-month basis meeting with OMB, and they're incrementally looking at that spend and putting it in the budget. And those are some of the transactions that you see. That unfunded overtime part represents almost a quarter of our spending this year, or $186 million. And we can go into that more detail. So the clarification we want to make is 40% of our overtime spending this year is not included in our adopted budget. So I don't think your question was answered last hearing, so I'm hoping that clarified things for you. So some other things we should mention. Our adopted budget this year is 88 million lower than our baseline in FY19, adjusted for collective bargaining. So that's a challenge. We're also down, like the commissioner stated in his testimony, 8% in uniform active staff. That's 6 million straight time hours that we don't have this year that we had in FY19. And we're also down another 14% in civilian active staff for the same period. So, generally, when you have mandated shifts and things like that, you absorb some of that cost on the overtime side when your straight time hours go down. So to add to what First Deputy Kinsella stated, we're definitely committed, though, in our core overtime budget to reducing hours. OMB's reduction target to the department in the 3 areas she mentioned is really to try to push down our FY24 hours under FY23. We're seeing progress in the first 3 months. We're cautiously optimistic. We would like to see longer data to see that downward trend, so that's encouraging. So we wanted to make sure we really in more detail explain the landscape of our overtime so you know what we're dealing with. Now, to get a look at spending, a little bit more detail on the spend, we know it's not a small number. The 160.1 adjustment in the plan was for incremental changes for some of those unfunded things not in our adoption baseline. Areas that have also gone down, besides arrests, investigations, and operational, our other overtime has gone down 12% this year in hours. That includes court time for police officers, and also details have gone down 12%. Now, some of the areas that are up are planned events. That's up 18% in hours. Some of that's attributable to increased coverage in October for High Holy Days, New Year's Eve, Brooklyn Bridge vendor enforcement. Unplanned events are also up significantly. That's for, we've had an increased amount of dignitary visits, and we'll also have the Trump trials starting in April, right? April spend. And then lastly, protests are up 600% in hours and spend year over year. So we're dealing with all of those challenges. We are working with OMB to find out what will be our new normal baseline, but also, with reductions that they're looking for us to do. So I'm hoping that really gave us a better starting point to discuss overtime in more detail. And if you have more questions on individual spend, I'll try to answer those.
Thank you. You have filled a very, very needed void.
Thank you. That means a lot.
I appreciate the clarity very, very much. Along those same lines, we're looking at, as was stated, a rise in events, different types of events, realizing that that does contribute to overtime. What is, and I guess I'll shift back to this side of the table for this response, what is the decision-making process in determining how many officers are dispatched and at what level? And when and how is this considered overtime versus regular deployments?
No, I'll switch it over to my Chief Department, Jeff Maggi.
Congratulations, Chief.
Before I do, just let me reiterate that since October 7th, the NYPD has responded to over 2,400 protests, and each protest is unique in its own nature, given certain circumstances, certain threat levels. So I'll turn it over to Chief Maggi to fulfill the second part of that question.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Speaker Adams. Just in terms of how we prepare for planned events and how we deploy, when we become aware of a planned event, the precinct or the borough concerned will usually put a plan together. They will make a request for a certain amount of officers to be deployed at the planned protest. It comes down to my operations unit, my chief, Matt Galvin, who's in charge of operations. He takes a look at it, and then he'll bring it to me, and we'll go over it, and we'll make a final decision. Since I've been in this role, we've been cutting down on a lot of our planned events. We've been saving money at a lot of our planned events. I think our biggest challenge is the unplanned events, where we're spending a lot more money. As the commissioner just said, we're closing in on 3,000 protests since October 7th. Some of them we're aware of, and we treat them as a planned event. Some we're not aware of, and then we have to sometimes hold over members of the service from the day shift, the midnight shift, and this is what causes our overtime to increase. So it's been a challenge, especially since October 7th.
Yeah.
It's been a challenge, averaging 12 protests a day. And some are small, we use very little resources at. Some are massive and requires a lot of police personnel to control.
Thank you. How do you measure your progress in reducing overtime in some areas when there are increases that set back your own control policies?
I think we look at each individual category. Like I said, we have arrest overtime, we have operational overtime. Operational overtime is just the functions of a precinct. When officers get held on a late job, when something comes up and they need to hold additional officers, just operationally. We have our investigative overtime, you know, a bad scene, our detectives, our arrest. Those are our main overtime, and we look at those and we compare them one to themselves. How did we do last year? How did we do last month? Again, planned overtime, we look at how we, you know, did the year before. We have a parade, St. Patrick's Day parade. How did we do in 2023 versus how we did in 2024? We look at that. And like I said, the biggest problem is our unplanned overtimers, which is really skewing our overtime right now. And you know, it's difficult to even compare that to last year or the year before, because these are events, these are not our every year events. We know every year events, we know them in advance. These are different events, and they cause a strain to our department, a strain to our budget. A lot of them are unforeseen events, so that's what we look at.
But we also hold our supervisors accountable as well. Our ICOs, our precinct commanders, our borough commanders, the administrators in the boroughs that are responsible for the oversight of overtime, and our bureau heads. So every bi-weekly when we have these meetings, these variance meetings, overtime and overspending is a huge part, is the topic of our meetings. So we've been holding our bureau heads and all the supervisors involved accountable for spending.
Thank you. Do you anticipate another addition of overtime funding at adoption for fiscal year 2024?
I think that's something we're monitoring on a month-to-month basis with OMB. Protest overtime really is escalating. Just to give you a sense of scale, and this is just an estimate, from 4/21 to 5/7 alone, we spent almost $6 million in protest overtime. So I think that we just have to watch that closely. There's a lot of unknown factors with how much we're going to spend there. And I think, you know, also to give some more context, last year we spent about $7 million in protests, and we're already up to $53 million.
That was going to be my next question. Thank you for seeing that coming.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The fiscal 2025 overtime budget, we gave the figure, yours might have changed, but we have $564 million. This is approximately $400 million less than the current fiscal 2024 budget. What is the plan to address the fiscal risk of the potential under-budgeting, and are there plans to find future reductions and efficiencies?
So I think I can explain that simply. A lot of that amount is the one-year overtime increases you're seeing in just FY24. That funding was not baseline, so it helps cause that disparity. We also had some one-time adjustments for auto parts, IT infrastructure, so they make it look like the budget drops off the following year. So it's simply that.
Okay. Do we know how much overtime has been spent on planned versus unplanned events?
Yes. So fiscal year to date for planned events, we show we've spent $87.9 million, or 1.1 million hours. For unplanned, we've spent almost $128 million, and, we've spent almost $13 million in 173,000 hours.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to turn the page and talk about public relations and your DCPI budget. NYPD has recently undertaken several new public relations campaigns that have raised significant questions, including its use of social media and video production. This includes the use of official social media accounts to target public officials and civilians alike. These posts can often convey inaccurate or misleading information and could potentially incite threats of violence. I use the word potentially with caution because they have, in some cases, incited threats of violence to individuals. This conduct is dangerous, unethical, unprofessional, because included in the department's mission is to preserve peace, protect the people, and reduce fear. At the preliminary budget hearing, you testified that there are over 250 social media accounts which your executives and precinct commanders are given access to so they can inform the public in their area. In addition, several higher-level executives are entrusted with social media accounts to communicate with the public on behalf of the department. City law prohibits the use of city resources for political purposes. Using that resource to issue a statement that an elected official's stance on how an agency conducts itself is, quote, a horrifying affront to democracy, end quote, and that people should, quote, seek the change you want by getting involved. Then you know what to do, ... That seems to be conveying a political message, and potentially even worse, a message that could be misinterpreted and lead to threats. In addition, my concern is that while you may be speaking to one group of New Yorkers, you are indeed alienating other New Yorkers whose trust the department's officers need to help keep our city safe. As the bearers of public safety, what exactly is the department's message in this post? And how does this post help deliver it or advance the safety of New Yorkers?
Good morning, Speaker Adams.
Good morning.
All right, so a few points in response to your question. First, as you're aware, there is now a DOI investigation into these matters.
I prompted it.
I'm aware, yes. They have contacted us already. We are fully cooperative with that investigation. And I think it's critical that the investigation be allowed to play out. On the issue you raised about sort of politicity, on our view, I think it's not how we view that. We view that in a different way. We view that as part of, in the context of a debate, very significant debate and very intense debate about the nature of public safety in the city, the role of the police department, the role of policing in New York City. I do think that context is important, and I think that context informs the meaning of that tweet. And I think it also goes to the questions of whether or not it constitutes political activity as that term is defined under the COIB rules and under the patrol guide. That said, there is a DOI investigation. We think it's important that be allowed to play out. We don't want to do anything that's going to compromise that investigation. We want to respect that investigation, respect the rights of the people involved in that investigation. And when that investigation is over, if history is any guide, DOI will issue a report to the public. I imagine whatever that report says, the City Council will want to hear from us, but I do think it's important and necessary that we allow that investigation, that inquiry to play out as an independent investigation as requested by you.
No one is more excited than I am over that inquiry. and no one will be more excited than I will be to hear the results. Do you feel that post was appropriate?
Again, we're going to allow the DOI investigation to play out. I think that is critical. I don't
Do
think
you feel,
but I'm here speaking on behalf of the
Commissioner, do you
department.
feel that post was appropriate?
As you know, it's an active investigation. At that very end, I might be the arbitrator of discipline, so at this time, I cannot comment what's an active investigation.
Speaker Adams, if I may, it is important that that investigation be allowed to play out in fairness for everyone involved, whatever one's view on the post.
Do you feel the post should have been deleted?
Speaker Adams,
Do you feel it was deleted improperly?
I am not.
Do you feel
gonna
it should have
speak-
come back?
Speaker Adams,
Commissioner, do you feel that the post was appropriate and should have been, or should have been deleted?
I think it's appropriate for me to comment while this process is ongoing.
Speaker Adams, there
Did
is an
you
investigation.
instruct the chief to delete the post?
Speaker Adams, this is exactly what DOI is looking at.
Commissioner, did you instruct the chief to delete the post?
Speaker Adams,
I asked the
respectfully-
chief a question.
I understand, and very respectfully, Speaker, very respectfully. I understand your questions, I do. This is precisely what DOI is looking at, these issues. And in fairness to everybody involved, separate and apart from the substance, as a matter of process.
I think
as a
that
matter
that
of
was a very
fairness.
fair question for this hearing, sir.
Speaker Adams, given the DOI investigation,
The commissioner leads this department, sir.
yes,
I feel that was a very appropriate question for the leader of the NYPD to respond to this body.
it is also important to respect that investigation. There's a process here. There's, as you say, there are accusations being made against individual members of the department. There's a process for this. To sort of short-circuit that process at this hearing, I don't think is appropriate.
I beg to differ with your consideration there, and I will continue on my line of questioning when it comes to the appropriateness of such posts. Are such posts today being permitted as we speak?
Speaker, the DOI report, the DOI is going to look at this.
Is
They're
that a
looking at-
yes?
No, Speaker Adams, we cannot speak to the issues that are at play.
So as
or
we are
in the
speaking
investigation you
today,
requested.
if this post, like this post, were to be targeted towards any one of my members or any member of the press, any civilian, that's perfectly fine as we speak right now, going on your social media
Speaker
site.
Adams, we do have some disagreements here about some of the nature of these posts. We do. And I understand what you're saying. We have a difference of opinion on some of these issues.
That's not what I asked.
Speaker Adams, it is very important that we allow DOI to do its work, to look into the very issues
I
you're
agree
asking
with
about.
you. DOI is doing its work, will be allowed to do its work. My question was very simple and required a very simple yes or no response. I am going to consider that a yes, since you did not say no, that such posts will be ceased or have ceased since this hearing, before this hearing, since the last one seemed to be very, very highly charged, very proudly stated. I am going to consider that as we speak, the poster or posters will continue to do such until they are told not to. What is the current policy and procedure for reviewing social media posts made on NYPD accounts?
So right now, as you stated, Speaker, the NYPD has over 250 social media accounts.
Yes.
I can tell you over the last 4 months, there have been over 23,000 social media posts throughout our social media platform. I give my executives autonomy to speak directly to the public, and they do that through social media. And I can also tell you that my executives are very passionate about what they do in their bureaus. They're very passionate about the work that men and women do in this city every day to keep New Yorkers safe.
Are the
I have my
posts
assistant
reviewed before
commissioner-
they're posted?
I have my assistant commissioner, Carlson
Okay.
Evans, here, who oversees.
Who reviews the post before they go up? Who reviewed the post regarding my colleague before it went up?
Okay, over the past 10 years, the department has embraced the use of social media. Beginning in 2014, prior to that, there was basically one voice in the department. At 2014, under the direction of Commissioner Breton, he wanted all his executives to be able to address the community and be able to speak to the community to address their concerns. So when a precinct commander has a social media account, he is the one that decides what is going to go out and how they are going to inform the community.
That's a problem.
Now, these social media posts are reviewed by members of DCPI. If there is something that is inappropriate, we would address it. And on certain cases, they've been taken down.
Who reviewed the post in question from Chief Shell and said that was okay?
Again, Speaker Adams, these are precisely the issues that DOI is investigating. We are cooperative in that investigation. That's exactly the point of the inquiry that you asked for them to look at this,
Nobody.
investigate the facts.
No one reviewed the post that Chief Shell put up.
Speaker Adams, these are
Nobody.
precisely the factual issues you have asked DOI to look into, and we're going to respect that process.
Okay. Are there currently any considerations being made to change the current policy? No. Okay.
We are going to look very carefully at what DOI comes back to us with. And there's going to be a report, as we all know.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a no as well. How many NYPD agency staff are there whose primary task is public relations?
I think I can help out with that.
Thank you.
I have the public relations budget here.
Okay.
So right now, we have 86 headcount budgeted for the Public Relations Division. So in that ballpark.
Do we know what their responsibilities are?
I do not have that
Okay.
detail.
Does anybody know what their, okay.
Yes, the Office of Public Relations, DCPI, is open 24 hours a day, so it's staffed 24 hours a day. We have a deputy commissioner, an assistant commissioner. We have several frontline supervisors, detectives, and police officers. Specifically for social media, we have 6 individuals that are assigned to handle the social media. We have a sergeant, a detective, 3 police officers, and a civilian member of the service. They review what all the agency precinct commanders put out.
They do.
Yes. We also handle requests from the media. We average about 36,000 email requests per year, and we deal with members of the media answering their questions in regard to breaking news. We also cover parades and protest activity.
Okay. Does the NYPD rely on personnel or services outside of the Department for Public Relations? And if so, can you tell us the amount of each of those contract payments?
We'll have to get back to you with that detailed information.
Do we know whether or not there are outside contracts at all? Payments aside? No?
There is one outside agency. We have a service that documents all social media posts, and they are recorded. So in case they are deleted, they're always preserved. Okay. And that is not funded by the department. That is covered by Doris and under OIT.
Okay, thank you. Outside of body camera video and surveillance video monitoring, how many staff are assigned to video production for your public relations videos? And how much is the department spending on PS and OTPS for public relations video production?
Okay, we also have, under DCPI, we have a creative services unit where we have an executive director and I believe 6 or 7 civilian members that produce videos for the department.
Okay. How do these numbers relate, or how do the numbers, we don't have the numbers, right?
I do not.
Okay, all right, we don't have those numbers. Let's move on to Columbia and City College response. On April 30th, the NYPD was asked by Columbia University to respond to protests, and it was also called into City College. Videos and social media posts of the protests and the NYPD's responses have raised some concerns with the council. about the scale and tactics used that night and the following days, and we'd like to review that. The department deployed significant resources to Columbia and City College. Can you explain the decision-making process behind deploying the amount and types of resources that were deployed? Ma'am.
Yes, I'll explain that. So, on that particular evening, when we received the call early in the day for Columbia that they want us to come clear their campus, I sat down with my leadership team. We put a plan together. We used approximately 600 to 700 cops to respond there to deal with the protests that were going on the sidewalks and the street, to address the encampments, and to address Hamilton Hall that was taken over by protesters.
Did the department follow established guidelines for mobilizing the department's resources, or were the tactics and operational decisions unique to this situation?
They were a little bit of both. We definitely followed established procedures. We mobilized our cops in advance. We did roll calls. We gave everybody specific instructions. I called chiefs from all over the city to help out to make sure that we did this accurately and as safe as possible. And, the plan itself was particular to Columbia. It was we never moved on Columbia before, so it was particular to Columbia, working with their public safety team as well. And it was done at their request. And, I believe we did a very safe procedure in terms of going in there. People in the street, we asked them, we gave them numerous warnings. People in the encampments, there were only a few people in the encampments. And the people who broke into the building, we arrested the people in the building.
Chief Madry, at our preliminary budget hearing, you testified that when responding to protests, NYPD starts with the lightest touch. Would you classify this response that night as a light touch? Because based on media coverage and the video that your department made and released, this response appeared to start with more than just the lightest touch.
It may appear to you that it was more than the lightest touch, but we're the ones that's walking into danger, into unforeseen dangers. We don't know what's waiting for us. We have to go in there with enough resources, and bringing enough resources also helps de-escalate it. When people see we have enough resources, they usually will back down instead of challenging us. We took enough resources in there. We had to make sure we had ample amount of police officers to make arrests, to clear buildings, to put life-saving measures if need be, to talk to people. And I think we did all of that. We did it precisely, and I think we did it as safe as possible.
On Tuesday night, the NYPD was called to respond to an encampment on FIT's campus. How did this deployment scale differ from the response we saw at Columbia's campus, and what was the decision-making process behind the scale of that deployment?
The FIT deployment, it wasn't something that we were prepared for. We were actually out there to address another protest, and then FIT somehow became the focal point. So the resources that we had there already were used to address FIT.
There have been a number of protests at colleges, which we've seen, colleges and universities around the city, that the NYPD has responded to. What has been the full cost of the NYPD's response to these protests, and how much of this is overtime spending?
So I think for protests in general, we have those figures that I stated before. Since October, which we really saw protest overtime taking off and started individually tracking it, we've had 53 million in spend and 677,000 hours spent. This is 46 million more than last year. So anything more detailed than that, we can circle back with council.
Thank you. How does the size and scale of equipment and support vehicles used, as well as specialized units deployed, impact the costs of these operations? And are they supported within the department's current budget? For example, The resources deployed at Columbia differed significantly from the resources deployed at the new school.
Yes, so, I mean, there was a different challenge at Columbia. I mean, there was a building that was taken over, that was broken into, that was barricaded. We needed to bring different resources. All the resources that were brought are resources we already own. Our Bearcat, our emergency service personnel, they're already in our possession. In comparison to the new school, we didn't need those special resources. School personnel was able to let us into the building. We walked in there, and we told anyone if they want to leave, leave, and whoever didn't want to leave, we arrested them and we brought them back to our processing center. So we weren't faced with the same challenges at the new school that we were faced at with Columbia.
At Columbia, just for my own edification, what were the circumstances around the lockdown situation, particularly for faculty, for others that were told to shelter in place?
If I may, so that was a directive that, as I understand it, was given by Columbia University. I believe there was I'm not sure if it was email or a text message that was sent out by the university to students, faculty who were on campus to shelter in place. We were aware that that was happening, but that was a message from Columbia, not
from the university itself,
it was,
not
yes.
from the NYPD.
That's correct.
How much has been spent on deployments to college campuses, and will the colleges reimburse the city for the cost of increased police presence going forward?
So for the campus-specific overtime spending, we would need to do an analysis and get back to you on that. As for the reimbursement, I'll defer to Commissioner Gerber.
And that is something we are exploring. We don't have an answer for you on that yet. Totally understand the ask, and that is something that we are internally actively looking into.
Has any other institution besides Columbia asked for sustained presence?
At this time, no. Columbia was the only one that did ask for it, and we only.
I think there may be correct, but there may have been. I'm just not sure. There may have been a request from NYU as well. I don't want to give inaccurate information. So I think we have to get back to you on that, because if memory serves, there may have been a request from NYU as well.
Okay.
But Columbia was the only place we actually put sustained resources. A request may have been made, but Columbia received the resources. In NYU, we didn't put resources on the campus.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more. I know my colleagues, I'm taking up a lot of your time, colleagues, so it's okay. Thank you. Let's talk about NYPD settlement costs just for a minute. During the hearings on the preliminary budget, the comptroller stated his belief that the city's payouts and settlements from claims be shouldered by the agency or department responsible for the claim. He stated that agencies responsible for the actions that brought about the claim have no incentive to improve their performance, since the costs of the payouts do not count against their budgets. Does the department believe that dollars spent on internal discipline, training, and robust supervision can save the city in the long run by limiting the dollars spent on settlements and claims for misconduct?
Well, I can start with that. I think we spent a tremendous amount of time and resources on, I think, everything you're talking about. For example, we have an entire bureau, our Professional Standards Bureau. That's what they do in trying to enhance supervision, enhance sort of mitigate problems, prevent problems from arising, trying to track these sorts of issues. So they're doing that. Obviously, there's an entire bureau that does training, tremendous resources put into training. An entire internal affairs bureau. So I couldn't speak to the dollar value, but I think those bureaus, there must be a tremendous amount of money that's going into those resources. Obviously, it's not just about mitigating litigation payouts, but I would like to hope that those bureaus, through doing their job effectively, will decrease litigation payouts over time.
What's your budget and head count? Your budget and head count for your Internal Affairs Bureau, and do you think that it's sufficient to review all allegations and instances of misconduct?
That I'll have to get back to you on that specific budgeted head count for that bureau.
Miguel?
Yeah. I apologize.
Chief of Internal Affairs, we could talk about his head count.
Good morning. The headcount of Internal Affairs grew by over 300 people in July of last year. On July 3rd, Internal Affairs took over the investigative units. So our current headcount is at 653 members.
All right. What are some baseline controls and operational protocols that officers and executives alike should follow to avoid misconduct like the type of misconduct that we've mentioned previously? What are the disciplinary measures taken for breaking that protocol, and how do CCRB recommendations play a role in that disciplinary process?
As far as CCRB is concerned, they handle FATO, which is force. Internal Affairs has serious misconduct and corruption, right? When you have force, discourtesy, and abuse, that goes to CCRB. If CCRB gets an allegation that falls into Internal Affairs realm, they refer it to us. If we have an allegation that falls into their realm, we refer it to them. As far as controls that we have in order to address misconduct, we get the allegation. The allegation is processed and assessed, at which point it either goes to one of our groups, which is serious allegations, and then that's the reason that we also took over the investigative units. In order to have a proper investigation or a seamless investigation or the same type of investigation within the groups and the investigative units. So what we found, and I'm just going to let you know the reason that it was done. What we found was that the investigations at the IU or investigative unit process, they were assigned to each borough and bureau. So across the city, you were seeing different type investigations done in a different way, discipline laid out in a different way. So that's why everything came under the Internal Affairs Bureau. That way we could have the same type of investigation and assess the same type of discipline.
Thank you. This is my final couple of questions. At the preliminary budget hearing, we asked what efforts the department implements to reduce the impact of settlements and claims on the city's budget. Your office responded that NYPD, quote, continually reviews policies, procedures, and training to mitigate the likelihood of claims and payouts, end of quote. What are some specific policies, procedures, and training you've implemented recently to ensure good office conduct, and do you feel the current policies and training are sufficient and are working to deter officer misconduct?
So I can speak to that. Just to go through a few things that we've already implemented or are working on. I think that speaks to your question. So for one thing, for example, is compliance stat. It started this year, and it builds off of force stat, which existed previously. But now it's looking at a much more holistic view, not just on force-related issues, but also more broadly on compliance issues. It functions sort of like ComStat, but for compliance issues. And it's really, I think, a very effective mechanism, and I think has a lot of promise to ensure and really emphasize supervisor accountability. In the same way that at ComStat, we have supervisors up at the podium who are being held accountable in terms of enforcement, here we have supervisors at the podium being held accountable on compliance issues. That's really important. Another thing that we're rolling out soon, we have a Trulio pilot that we're going to be doing, and that involves essentially AI looking at body-worn camera feeds to identify problems. It's a pilot, hasn't started yet. We're going to have an impact and use policy that will be going out, a draft one, under the Post Act, so there'll be a lot more information put out to the public about that. But I think that actually has a lot of potential to help with compliance. We've been looking at issues in terms of our car chase policy and ways to improve that and to enhance supervisory oversight when it comes to pursuits. And also something else we're working on, we have an early intervention program. We want to do more in terms of incorporating lawsuit data or lawsuits or red flags into that process. We already have, as part of that process, flagging situations in which the law department declines to represent an officer, or there's a lack of indemnification. That's actually required under the court order with the monitor. But we're looking to sort of expand that to try to identify the sort of what would be appropriate red flags to say, okay, given a lawsuit pattern or whatever it may be, this officer should be incorporated into early intervention. We haven't fully landed on how we're going to do that yet, but that's something that's being actively pursued now.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it over. Before I do, just a quick remark. I really appreciate all of you being here today to offer your testimony. You've come here in large number, which the council sincerely appreciates because we need to hear from you. I will also express my disappointment in the lack of response to simple yes or no questions that I asked regarding the situation with the social media posts. I think that the questions were pretty simple. Yes or no is pretty simple to respond. Understanding the investigation that is going on, yes or no's to my simple questions should have been answered. My biggest concern, though, is the answer to this particular question that I asked you is that as we sit here today in this hearing, what is prohibiting the same posts from going up to damage elected officials, media, and civilians at the moment that we are sitting in this hearing right now? What is being done to prohibit that or stop it from happening to cause any more harm to those that are being targeted and or spoken about as we sit here today? I am disappointed in your responses. I turn it back over into the chairs.
Thank you, Speaker. I've also been joined by Council Members Sanchez, Palladino, Banks, Powers, Rivera on Zoom, and Council Member Brewer. I'll try to be as quick as I can because we've got a lot to do. Just staying on something that the Speaker just mentioned, and I think DCPI mentioned that the social media policy really started under Commissioner Bratton. Was there a change in that policy since then, or is that policy, the policy that existed under Bratton is the same policy that exists now?
You'll have to forgive me. Actually, I don't know what that policy looked like at the time, so I'm not in a position to speak to what extent there were changes in the social media policy since this was years ago. I'm not sure anyone here was involved in that policy at that time.
Okay, I mean, because there's definitely been a change in the aggressiveness of the approach, right, since Bratton. So was there a conscious decision to get more aggressive?
Well, I think, again, what I would say is, to the extent what I think you're asking about is the recent posts, and I would go back to what I said to the Speaker before, which is this is precisely, I think, exactly what DOI is looking at, and they'll have their report. I want to emphasize again, we are fully cooperative with that work, and I think when that report is done, and that investigation is done, that inquiry is done, that report is done, I have every expectation that we'll be talking about this again. But at this point, I don't think I'm in a position to answer that question in light of an important DOI investigation.
Okay, staying on the overtime budgeting as well as the units of appropriation. So the council continues to push for transparency into agency spending and operations by negotiating every year at adoption the creation of new units of appropriation. Just allows us to take a closer look at how this money is spent. However, the overtime spending is still centrally budgeted, even though we receive precinct-level overtime spending from a term and condition. So could you talk a bit about, if the NYPD has precinct-level data on overtime spending, couldn't we then create a projected overtime budget for each precinct?
I don't see why that's not possible.
Okay. All right, and broadly, the FY24 general budget increase. So at the FY24 adopted budget was $5.8 billion. Since then, the FY24 budget has increased by $732 million to $6.5 billion, of which approximately $500 million comes from city funding. I know you mentioned that 92% of your overall budget is personnel costs. So other than increases to related overtime costs, could you talk about what are some of the drivers behind that increase?
Right, so some of the changes since adopt, which I'm still getting familiar with. I know there was the police officer restoration in the January plan. That was for this January and April class. We also have the restoration in the executive plan for July and October. We have an auto parts increase of $9 million. We have a substantial amount in overtime, which I mentioned earlier, probably $400 to $500 million. We have the $28 million IT adjustment. We also had an increase of almost $42 million in the JAM plan for the domain awareness system. That system supported both on city tax levy and also federal grant funding. We've had some lease adjustments as well. I know there's a lot of transactions in the November plan that were savings, so that offsets some of the increases.
So the current FY25 budget is $5.8 billion, which is actually $700 million less than the current FY24 budget. So then would you assume that the FY25 budget would need to be increased as well?
Well, some of that is overtime, right? The incremental overtime for those unfunded projects that I mentioned, we're doing that incrementally with OMB in just the current year. So that's our $400 or $500 million of that variance. Then we also, again, have those $9 million for auto parts, $28 million for IT infrastructure. A lot of that's driven by just one-time funding adjustments in this fiscal year that was not baseline to next year.
Okay. And what is the anticipated civilian and uniform attrition for the current fiscal year?
So for attrition figures, I'm going to defer to the Chief of Personnel.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chief.
So in terms of in reviewing our attrition, I'm happy to report that we're actually starting to stabilize in terms of attrition. As of this morning, we currently have 34,402 uniformed personnel currently working. We are 649 officers below our authorized headcount of 35,051. On a positive front, if we compare 2024 with 2023, we noticed a 45% decrease in attrition, specifically with members of the service that have less than 5 years of service. So just to give you an example, we lost 936 officers due to resignations. Almost 50% of those resignations, those officers pursue a career in another law enforcement agency. It's noteworthy to us because we've also seen a slight uptick in our requests for reinstatements. And probably what's most noteworthy is that in the first quarter of 2023, calendar year 2023, we experienced a 78% increase in requests for reinstatements. Now, typically, we generally average between 2 and 3 reinstatements per month. So these are noteworthy increases, and what makes the 2023 78% increase noteworthy to me is because that occurred prior to the announcement of the PBA contract, which was announced in April. So we're doing well. I mean, we're below our 3-year average of attrition, but you know, with hiring on a quarterly basis, we're basically we're treading water, basically. We're fighting our attrition. We have an upcoming class, you know, thanks to you. We have a class that will be hiring in the upcoming months. And again, it's like a constant struggle where we have people leave, and then we hire the class, and we're right back. So we're hovering around like 649 officers on any given academy class cycle.
So while I have you, the recently adopted state budget included bills that many on this council supported, granting pension increases for officers who remain on the job past 20 years. So do you have a number for how many officers have or are close to 20 years on the job?
So I could tell you that would entitle a police officer with 25 years of service, between 25 years and 29 years of service, would be entitled to the same rights in terms of a pension for a third-grade detective who served for 2 years of service at the higher salary rate. Just to give you a perspective, we currently have 76 police officers that are in that category right now. We also have, as part of that legislation, people who serve 30 years or more of service would be entitled to the same rights, pension rights, as a sergeant who served for 2 years at the higher salary rate. And just to give you a perspective on that, we currently have 53 police officers that fall into that category. Right now, we have 402 police officers that have between 20 and 24 years of service. But we have 3,114 police officers that actually are beyond that are eligible for service retirement. Now, I know these numbers seem low, but I think this is just a starting point because these numbers will increase over time.
What is the NYPD's current hiring status for civilian positions?
In terms of?
Is there currently a hiring freeze for civilian positions?
So for civilians, we are still subject to the 2-for-1 hiring policy with OMB. So generally every 2 separations, we're allowed to hire 1 back.
Are there certain civilian positions where there's a higher vacancy or a higher priority to fill?
You know, the positions that we like to fill, you know, like, for example, the psychologist position, that's a position that is challenging to us because there's a need for, you know, with our wellness programs and then just trauma debriefing incidents that the psychologists respond to. To be a psychologist in the NYPD is a little bit unique because many of them serve on call. They serve in an on-call capacity for a trauma debriefing. If there's a catastrophic incident, they're out there to provide support to not just our members of the service, but the families that may be affected by an incident. So we've noticed that to be competitive with the private sector, we tend to pay a little bit less than the private sector. So that's a constant. I would say that is a position that we have difficulties in, you know, trying to attract people to do this type of work. I think because of the on-call schedule, remote work options, like these are the issues that I get based on the feedback of me. I read all the resignations, and I like to see what people report when they leave, and these are the things that I see regularly. It's salary, competitive salary, and resignations. Remote work options. Another thing I want to point out is the information technology positions are positions that are challenging because the private sector is very competitive in terms of salary. They offer, you know, remote work options. They're just with cybersecurity and the need to have like a robust cybersecurity program. It's difficult to find highly talented and credentialed people because of the competitive nature of the salaries. And again, I look at all of the resignations, and we had about 928 civilians who resigned. Believe it or not, several of them resigned to become police officers, but the ones that I focus on even very closely are the ones that have agency ramifications, specifically the IT positions and the psychologist positions.
What about 911 dispatchers?
So 911 dispatchers.
Are they included in your civilian count?
Yes.
Is there still a 2-for-1 hiring freeze on dispatchers?
Well, I can't speak for the hiring freeze, but what I can tell you about our police communications technicians. So right now, we currently have 1,356 police communications technicians that serve the city of New York. 118 of them are on extended leaves, and that could be from a military leave to a family leave. We're actively processing 138 viable candidates, and we expect to have another hire on June 7th. But in terms of attrition with the police communications technicians, we lost so far this year 87, but I want to report that 14 of the 87 elected to serve became police officers with this last class.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Quickly, school safety agents, what is the FY25 budget for the school safety division?
So for school safety specifically, the PS budget is approximately $204 million.
Say it again.
$204 million. And the OTPS budget is approximately $4.9 million.
So in December, I believe, NYPD announced that a new position, assistant school safety agent, would be created to fill some of the need for school safety agent positions in schools. How will those positions be funded?
That I'm not sure yet. We will get back to you.
Okay, because I'd also like to know what the estimated increase in the budget would be for those positions. I want to talk about ghost plates. The administration recently announced a multi-agency city task force dedicated to removing ghost cars, ghost plates from the streets. I understand that PD, and I've seen it myself, has been performing stings to address the issue. I'd like to know how much is budgeted for those stings and what resources have you dedicated to getting these cars off the street?
Good morning. I don't have the exact budget for these resources, but I could tell you that our citywide response teams have been focused mostly solely on these ghost plates, ATV initiatives, and removal of these cars. It should be noted that just the 4 months of this year alone, in 2024, we removed 209 ghost vehicles off our streets. In the entire year of 2022, we removed 10,000. So we're definitely on pace to surpass that. It should be noted that our roving band 911 calls in 2023, I'm sorry, year to date, we have 323 911 calls, and last year at this time we had 812 911 calls for roving bands. So the removal of these ATVs and ghost cars is definitely giving what the public wants, because our 911 calls and 311 calls in regards to these roving bands have sufficiently been decreased.
Do you have a sense of how much revenue we're losing every year to ghost plates?
I have that answer, Chief Rivera, Chief of the Transportation Bureau. So we've been doing operations on some of the major thoroughfares into New York City. We've done operations, we've done 10 operations since March 5th. And just at these locations, we've made 131 arrests, and we're talking about $3.5 million of judgments from 514 vehicles that were seized. So this is just probably the tip of the iceberg. We're doing these operations now twice a week, and we've had success wherever we've gone. The good thing about this is that this is not just the NYPD. This is a multi-agency operation, which consists of New York State Police, MTA, TVTA, the Sheriff's Office, and we just recently got on board with the Taxi and Limousine Commission.
And how often, I've seen recently, the big operations at the bridges or the tunnels, how often are we doing those now?
We're doing those twice a week.
Twice a week?
Right.
And the SLEEP Act, so the council supported the passage of the state SLEEP Act, which allows the police to cite vehicles with incredibly loud and illegal mufflers and exhaust systems. It increased the fines from, I think, $150 to now it's $1,000 per ticket. Could you tell us how many summonses have been issued citywide for the SLEEP Act?
Excuse me, I could tell you just the number of exhaust summonses that we've issued year to date. 947 exhaust summonses for 2024, year to date. 2023, we issued 2,058 of these. It should be noted that we have 88 sound meters deployed in all of our patrol service bureaus precincts. That also actually helps with this enforcement.
So 947 year-to-date?
Exhaust summonses, correct.
I'm assuming those are all in Bay Ridge? Okay. Last thing from me, and I think then we're going to take a break and we'll come back. Mental health removals. So recently it was announced that PD's role in conducting involuntary mental health removals would be increasing. This included the creation of clinical telehealth within the department to support police officers in evaluating individuals for hospital transport. So could you give us an idea of has the system been fully implemented, and what other supports are in place for officers that are now tasked with evaluating the need for mental health removals and transports?
Good morning.
Morning.
So under the directive that we received last year, we began doing involuntary removals for people who we knew could not care for themselves. We send them to area hospitals with the expectation that they will be evaluated in the CPEPs at the various hospitals that we take them to. We have done training for people who do the removals, and but I want to state overwhelmingly, we take people voluntarily to the hospital. When we see someone who is in mental health crisis, our objective is to treat them as an aided case rather than to criminalize the behavior.
And how many have you done of those involuntary removals year to date?
So this number is as of March 31st, 2024. We have done a total of 1,719 removals.
Okay. And do you have a dedicated headcount for these programs, or programs like this and Be Heard? Is there a dedicated?
No, Be Heard is not an NYPD program. That is a program run by the FDNY and Health and Hospitals.
The PD doesn't go on those runs?
We do not go on the runs, but we totally support the program in terms of it's the appropriate agency responding to people in mental health crisis.
Okay. We're going to take a break as requested, and then we're going to resume with questions from Chair Salam. 10-minute break. Thank you.
decide to do this now? Did he just decide now, or?
No, we decided like this morning.
It's right here.
Yeah, these are not necessarily like added to his particular questions.
He can take it.
You can take it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's fine. If he wants it, you could just take it.
Let me see if they're general. Yusuf wants to ask more specific questions.
He could ask more specific questions too.
Right.
Like the things we have here is what we have prepped, and he can ask all of these, like whichever ones he wants to.
Okay.
And if he has any on top of that, he can just ask, like, yeah. I'll talk to you. Morning, Chair. This is like the old question. Gave it to him last time. Yeah, we gave these SRG one to him last time, and he didn't take it. What's the question you're trying to ask? The supplement shit.
Surveillance related, Win Rosario related.
What's the SRG stuff?
These are the SRGs.
Can you fill up the last question? The old one, the last one that we took out. I just missed it.
Oh, the overhead. This is the chair one and then the committee one.
So, okay. I'm fucking confused.
I think we're good. I'm gonna talk to him on the side.
This is his, right? Just get him to, he can ask whatever he wants.
Right. Okay. Cool. Thank you, man.
Yeah. This isn't showing up on your section. Give it to that guy. I don't know what the fuck.
Worst case, I'll text you
Huh?
questions.
No, the guy who was here. Yusuf. Yeah.
Do you want this?
Excuse me. Sorry. Hey, hold on. Did you? Is this for Mike? Oh, you got it.
If I could have everyone's attention, please. We'd like to ask everyone to please start finding seats again. We are going to reconvene in just a moment. Also, a friendly reminder to please silence all electronic devices. All electronic devices turn to silent, please. And again, for those of you who just arrived, if you are here to testify, we need you to fill out a witness slip at the Sergeant-at-Arms desk at the front of the room. Once again, if you are here to testify, regardless if you registered online, please fill out a witness slip at the Sergeant at Arms table. Once again, we ask everyone to please kindly find their seats. Thank you. Once again, if everyone could please find a seat. We have quiet in the chambers, please. We are going to reconvene. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We've also been joined by Councilmember Aviles. We've got, I think, 3 more folks to swear in, and then we're going to hand it over to Chair Salam.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to councilmember questions? Chief Tobin. Deputy Commissioner Delatorre.
I do.
Assistant Commissioner Nieves.
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, turn over to Chair Salam. Thank you.
Good morning. We are still in the morning. So I'd like to start with questions in relation to non-enforcement-based public safety. The Police Pullback Initiative with the Brownsville Safety Alliance, a pilot program from 2021, where police withdrew their regular posts while community-based violence interrupters and crisis management groups watched over a 2-block zone, saw very positive results. My questions are, has the department considered replicating or expanding this type of programming to other neighborhoods? And if not, why?
Good morning, Chair. Just really quick, and I'll ask Chief LePetre to join in, and Commissioner Kinsella. Yesterday, we had a meeting with citywide CMS groups. We had a very positive and productive meeting, and we all committed. Every precinct commander in the city, most of our crisis management systems were there, and we committed that we're going to build up our partnership, but we have a great partnership already. People are trying to say we don't, and that's far from true. We have a great partnership. I know most of our CMS providers, most of the leaders personally. We had a great meeting, a productive meeting. Our commanding officers, we have new commanding officers in place. A lot of them were able to meet with their CMS provider and exchange numbers. And even our commands that don't have CMS providers, we've said, find out who your nearest provider is, make sure you have a contact with them. Let's do some unconventional crime fighting, getting to young people, working with them. We saw a terrible event that happened in Soho, in the 1st precinct, that doesn't have a CMS site, that goes back to East Flatbush. And the commander from that precinct connected with the service provider from East Flatbush to help. So we're definitely going in the right direction with that. I think I see the first deputy wants to say something, ma'am.
And we'll add that we've been working with Councilwoman Rivera to add a CMS in Bellevue, because the unfortunate circumstances of earlier this week with our young male, we think that adding CMS work into Bellevue is going to be a real good job for our communities. But like Chief Madry said, that yesterday we have meetings before. It's not just yesterday. We had meetings a month or two ago with our CMS workers. And believe it or not, our commanders and the CMS workers work very well in the communities together. Yesterday was just to talk about the summer and how we want to continue to work together and to help our youth, because we're seeing a real crisis. So we're brainstorming together.
And if I could just add, as far as the CMS, it's data-driven also. You know, my office, the Crime Control Strategy, we share data with CMS. You know, areas that we think maybe they could expand to. Maybe they're just, the catchment area might be 2 housing developments, let's just say in East New York, but we see an uptick in shots fired maybe in the rear of that housing development. So we will share that data with them, and like Chief Madry said, and Commissioner Kinsella, it is a working relationship, and it's really never been better. I mean, there is intel that we share with them also. You know, we do share intel on things that we see on social media, or things that we might have connectivity with as far as young gang or crew violence. And, you know, again, it's a real good working relationship.
And if I could just add, Chair John C. Parker, for over 2 years, we've been working with the mayor's office with the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, which is the mayor's blueprint to end gun violence, which there's a cornerstone of is based on the Brownsville community, that Public Safety Alliance, where the 7375, 6 precincts, 7375, 40, 42, 44, and 47. It is a partnership of all government agencies to work together to prevent gun violence. In fact, we host the quarterly meeting that they have of that, that's hosted in the NYPD's Intelligence Center. And we've been a partner with them for working literally every day with, it's co-chaired by A.T. Mitchell and the first deputy mayor.
Turning to traffic enforcement agents. Fiscal year 25 executive budget includes $191 million that supports 3,260 positions within the traffic enforcement division. Does the department believe that automated enforcement of traffic violations such as speed cameras and other technology can be leveraged to reduce the manpower needed in traffic enforcement? And also, could such shifts to automated enforcement serve as a mechanism to overcome historical patterns of racially disproportionate or biased policing of traffic violations?
Chief Rivera, Chief of Transportation. So the one thing with the traffic cameras are that they're fixed. So we like to be we are always data driven. We like to focus on the spots where we're seeing most of our issues arise. And then the logistics of fixing those cameras, taking them down to redeploy them somewhere else is not always expedient. They do have their value, you know, certainly in certainly highly trafficked areas, you know, it's a deterrent, but then once everybody knows that they're there, they tend to slow down. There's also all kinds of social media apps that alert people to where these objects are affixed. So we do have a shortage currently of traffic enforcement agents. We're down 358, but we do have a class in right now of 114 that's expected to graduate on July 26th. We do believe in our people, that they're very effective when given the right locations. They're out there not just doing intersection control, but also addressing the parking congestion. And I do believe that the traffic enforcement agents are the best remedy for the current situation.
This is not a question that I've been given to consider, but I was on the highway this morning, headed down to work. And I noticed that there were at least 2, I don't know if we call them, but they were food workers. They were on the mopeds, and you know, you could clearly see it said Uber Eats or something on the back of their thing. And I was just wondering, how do we address that, where those workers are now on the highways delivering food?
So, again, there are certain, you know, there's a lot of bike paths throughout the city. I think, you know, they're just increasing, you know, day by day. And we certainly would like the delivery workers to be in the bike paths. We also acknowledge that, you know, we don't want those vehicles on the highway. They're not equipped to be on the highway. There's not, they're wearing a helmet that it might be bike approved, but it's not necessarily DOT approved. So when we do see them, we absolutely do enforcement on it. We've seized, countless bikes. I think we're up to 8,000 this year versus 2,000 earlier. We're significantly up in mopeds and in e-bikes that we've seized. But again, I know that the mayor's office is working on a new agency that's going to take a lot of these situations that we're dealing with the e-bikes under consideration. And it's in the planning stages as of right now. But, there's a lot of different components that go to the delivery drivers as well as, people who are recreational users. And of course, safety is paramount. When we look at the causation of some of these incidents, a lot of it, unfortunately, is user error. There's no license requirement to have an e-bike. That's something that this multi-agency task force is looking to address. But in the meantime, we're doing our part with enforcement and education.
Thank you. Moving to discuss civilianization. As part of the administration's blueprint to end gun violence, released when the mayor entered office 2 years ago, the NYPD announced plans to identify inefficiencies within the department to enable uniformed officers to be shifted from administrative roles to patrol. What efforts at civilianization has the department undertaken to achieve more efficient deployment?
So I'm the face of civilianization. We're making every effort. So civilianization is something that we do on a regular basis. And again, because I have access to all the personnel tables, I have access to look at all of the commands in terms of their rosters and how they staff their personnel once we transfer them. So the police department, at the conclusion of 2023, I'm happy to report that we civilianized 500 positions. Now that's itemized as follows. So 133 police officers were redeployed to operational commands, meaning they worked, for example, like in police headquarters, or they worked outside one of our 98 enforcement commands, and they were transferred to an operational command, one of our 98 enforcement commands. We also redeployed, we reassigned 367 police officers that actually served in one of our enforcement commands, but they were performing tasks that could otherwise be, earmarked for a civilian employee. So they've been redeployed to perform patrol functions. So when we last had the pre-council briefing, we constantly audit the rosters. It's a constant process. Just to give you an example, we had 292 positions that we had identified that could be civilianized with redeployments and new hires. So we're down now, since the pre-budget briefing, we're down to 180. And this is something that I do personally. Under the supervision of First Deputy Commissioner Kinsella, one of the things that we did was we changed, and again, it's an institutional change. We never actually, at my position, never actually sat down and looked at the exact positions that we were going to hire for any specific week. Now, generally, we hire every Monday. We have hires every Monday. But nobody at my level prior to this management team, directed us to actually look that closely at it. So what we do is, when we were civilianizing, we changed the manner in which we deploy our hiring pools. So if we saw a position that could be more appropriately staffed by, let's say, a staff analyst, we would gear our hiring pools to staff analysts, like to people that we can call as a staff analyst to deploy them to that position. And that's how we were able to achieve these numbers. And again, it's something that we do every single day. I look at the hires every week, and when we can plug them in, we plug them in. So it's not something that I could say is going to end. It's like an ongoing, civilianization is an ongoing process for me. But it makes up for about 25% of my time at work every week.
So just to supplement the chief's testimony, I'm Bob Barrows and the Deputy Commissioner of Strategic Initiatives. I just want to talk about a little bit of the audit that we did at the beginning of the administration, and this came from the urging of City Hall as well. We took throughout 2022 and most of 2023, the department conducted literally a bureau by bureau review as part of its civilianization strategy to facilitate the return of additional officers to patrol. So that analysis included things like data review, site visits, interviews with bureau personnel, review of process improvements, tech solutions, and review of legal mandates and other requirements to really determine what the appropriate staffing level when it comes to uniforms in our bureau. So in that process, in doing those audits, we returned, significant numbers, nearly 2 academy classes, as the chief noted during that time. And we've built, as the chief mentioned, really long-term solutions. Civilianization is something that goes on every day, as the chief said, but we also reorganized a number of our bureaus to improve efficiency. We created within personnel a new unit to continuously review positions for civilianization.
Thank you. Are there established benchmarks for returning a specific number of officers to patrol, and over what time frame will this shift occur?
So I think a lot of that work happened during the audit that we've done in 2022 and 2023, but as the chief said, civilianization is something that's ongoing. But just going back to some of the criteria that we looked at when we did this analysis is, again, we were looking at, caseloads, workload of the bureau, data, full data review. We visited each and every one of these bureaus. We sat down with key bureau personnel, went through line by line their staffing, and also looked at how can we supplement some of that work through either just a process improvement or through or some sort of technology solution, and where we could find those efficiencies and those savings. That's when we made a decision either to redeploy, as the chief said, because another civilian could take this line that a uniform is doing, or we designated the spot for civilianization. We were going to bring a civilian in to do that spot and return that uniform member back to patrol.
What are the main reasons for uniformed officers serving in administrative roles, and how many officers are serving administrative roles due to injury or misconduct?
So just to circle back on your last question, I think to provide some context, less than 1% of our uniformed force in our 98 patrol commands are doing civilians work. So that's pretty noteworthy. In terms of restricted duty personnel, give you that number. I'm going to give you the right number. So we have just over 2,000 people that are on restricted duty that serve in one of our several what we call restricted duty pools. Now, these officers serve in support capacities. There are vital functions that need to occur that can really only be performed by a uniformed person. For example, we have officers that serve in some of our detective bureaus while they're on restricted duty. They can't perform the functions of a full-duty police officer, so that what we do is to maximize the full-duty personnel that can go out and do full-duty police work. We deploy them to functions that are necessary to run the agency, but not use a full-duty person to do that. Now, I'm the face of that as well. So I oversee the restricted duty program. I oversee all of my primary role in the agency is to document, track, and account for all uniform and civilian transactions, all the employee transactions. I manage the restricted duty pool. And again, that's like civilianization. This is something that occurs every day, because people who go on restricted duty, that changes. Like, we have people that are on, for example, position limitation. We have officers that are expecting to have children, and that they're going through a pregnancy, but they can't be out on patrol. So we have vital functions that we could deploy them to for the duration of their pregnancy, to perform vital functions while keeping somebody on full duty that we can have out to do enforcement work. Again, I manage that every day. those numbers change every day. They probably changed since this report was printed. So this is an ongoing thing, and we work in constant contact with our medical division. I supervise the physician staff across the agency in terms of how we manage when officers go out sick. I'm the one that oversees all of the officers, the sick system, our unlimited sick system. We have mechanisms where we look at people who we believe that are malingering or people that are trying to not go out and do enforcement work and maybe report sick. I'm the person that sends out people to make sure that these people are actually out sick. And I'm also the person that oversees the physician staff that gets these police officers back to work so that we can deploy them out on patrol.
I just want you to be assured that even our officers who are assigned to administrative functions, they are mandated to go out on patrol. We do administrative all-outs, especially in the summertime. Every week they have to go out. When we're in emergency situations, we'll mobilize our people who are working in administrative capacities, including at 1PP, my office as well. We will use all of our resources where we need them. So anyone who's full duty, if they may be currently assigned to an administrative position, they are mandated to go out. They are mandated to respond to mobilizations when we need it. And during our ComStat process, when we see problems, we see we need additional resources, that's one of the first resources I asked our commanders about, how we're using our administrative people, cover school posts, cover posts where we had trouble. It's all part of the plan.
Will officers be returned to patrol if on modified or administrative duty due to substantiated allegations of misconduct?
Well, eventually, yes, but it depends on a case-to-case basis, right? So we can't say that all will respond, will return to full duty. It depends what the penalty is. Sometimes the penalty is to fire, separate from the department, but ultimately, our goal is to make sure that justice is served for the person making the discipline, the complaint, and for the officers to receive due process and to return them back to full duty in an expeditiously way.
Under the leadership of the First Deputy Commissioner, we have put a working group together to go over these cases on a monthly basis. So every month we're going over what we call our modified suspension list to see who we can put back to full duty.
And this process, it doesn't linger on for 2 to 3 years. Now, every bureau that's DAO, every bureau that's involved has a time frame which they have to hear the cases, even trials and so forth. So with this working group, we are working with the community who have made the complaint to make sure that justice and they receive swift answers and results to their complaints, and that the officer is returned back to full duty or cleared for promotions or so forth.
So we have a process that, under the leadership of the First Deputy Commissioner, the Suspended Modified Review Board, and in conjunction with what Chief Iglesias is saying, I'm on that committee as well, and we made some institutional changes in terms of the administrative flow of paperwork. That cut down on the turnaround time for how long these cases are going to be active in terms of keeping somebody that might be facing a penalty. And as an institution, there was a mindset that when we came close to knowing what that penalty was actually going to be, it was at that time that the person was returned to full duty. The mindset and the cultural change that was shifted under this leadership team, and it's a big cultural shift, is we don't wait for that. Oftentimes an officer is in trouble and their duty status has changed, but we know what the outcome's going to be. Now, in the past, that period of time, one of the biggest shifts is that when we know what that penalty is going to ultimately be, then there's no need to keep them out for the period of time that we traditionally kept them out. And the Suspended Modified Review Board, Chief Iglesias accompanies my staff and I on that committee, and we return them back as quickly as possible. So we do that once a month, and we've turned several hundred officers back to patrol so that they can perform full-duty police work. It's something that we monitor on a regular basis.
And another aspect of it, we instituted we had a Command A, CD, Command Discipline, and a Command B. Now we have a Command C discipline, which is you receive up to 20 penalty days for internal misconduct. So now these officers that would have usually been held up or modified, now they're receiving this penalty, the CCD penalty, in lieu of being modified and so forth. So I think that was a huge difference as well, to make sure that we keep our officers fair, but we also make sure that the appropriate penalty is addressed.
Paul Gamble, Deputy Commissioner and Department Advocate. While we're anxious to return officers to full duty to perform the law enforcement function, we want to make sure that officers who are returned to duty have been appropriately sanctioned, where appropriate, for the misconduct. Sometimes that misconduct is so serious that they can no longer remain on the force. Last year, 78 members of the force were terminated. The total suspension days and vacation days imposed total 14,500, which would be the equivalent of $5.3 million in fines. So while we want the disciplinary process to move expeditiously, when police officers are brought back, we want them brought back with a sanction that will be a disincentive to any further misconduct. You should know, 91% of the force has never had an allegation of misconduct. And for those who do, 83% of them never have a second allegation. So we believe that our efforts are effective, and where someone should no longer be part of the force, they are removed.
Moving to PEG restorations, the PEG restorations as of July and October PEG restoration of July and October 2024 uniform academy classes. The executive plan includes the restoration of $62 million in fiscal year 25, $76 million in fiscal year 26, increasing slightly to $79 million in fiscal year 29. For the July and October uniform classes, each class is expected to include approximately 600 officers. With this restoration, 3 of the 5 classes which were eliminated in the November plan PEG have now been restored. Do you expect the additional 2 classes that are still canceled to be restored in a future plan?
So I think that's a discussion that needs to be had with OMB. Our first focus truly, and we're grateful for these classes because, as Chief Benoit stated, it's going to enable us to keep up with our attrition and maintain the current staffing levels. I think we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, and we want to see that we fill these 2 class restorations first.
How will you deploy the officers once they graduate from the academy? Are there certain precincts with low headcount and resources that need to be backfilled?
Yes. Deployment usually goes through my office. I sit down with, of course, the Chief of Crime Control Strategies, the Chief of Personnel. We look at first where we're having trouble. We look at crime. If we need to put more officers there, then we look at commands that are down in police officers, and then we put them there. So usually it's based on crime, conditions, where we need additional resources, and then we look to strengthen the commands that are suffering from personnel losses.
Yeah, and like I said, Chair, we mentioned over and over again how important our officers are to our department.
In their opening statements, I mentioned the great work they're doing. Over 16,000 guns taken off our streets. Month after month, we're seeing crime reductions in our city. And those are because of the cops that are out there doing the work every single day. And I sit here and I thank them for that.
And if I could just add, you know, the President Academy class that just graduated and the upcoming graduating class, you know, historically, 25 precincts make up 75% of the shooting incidents. We've identified 3.5% of the area of New York City, which encompasses 35% of all shootings in New York City. Those are where the officers are going. We're putting an additional 1,200 officers to those areas this summer, part of our summer deployment. When we did that last year, we saw a 35% reduction in those areas in shooting incidents. We saw a 42% reduction in confirmed shots fired, and we saw an increase in every enforcement category in those areas. And we're doing the same thing we did, well, we actually enhanced it this year and hopefully build on the successes that we had last year. And like I said, the majority of those officers are going to be on foot patrol in those areas.
I want to move to the IT adjustments. The executive plan includes an additional $28 million for information technology for the current year. What systems and technology does this funding support, and what's the total cost of these systems, and do these systems support reporting and documenting information on stops?
So I don't have specifically in detail what the systems do, but I can let you know what the funding was for. So when it comes to the department's OTPS budget, over 40% is IT related. So that really is the core of our OTPS budget that supports our critical infrastructure, communication for our officers, et cetera. So when the department did a detailed analysis of its IT budget, we had quite a few contracts and licensing programs that went up. I think with inflation, with escalations in contracts, licensing, that's something we're seeing consistently in our OTPS budget. So half of the $28 million just was for 5 things. Our Microsoft Premier support services, IBM licensing increases for our real-time crime center or our crime data warehouse. All of our Microsoft ELA licenses, our Azure cloud storage, you know, all of those things. We had IBI licenses for enterprise case and records management, and also additional license costs even for our body-worn camera subscription. So that was half of it at $14.3 million. I think even in my prior role at finance, we were seeing a lot of pressure on IT costs going up in the industry. So this particular increase was for cash flow for the rest of the year. And of course, you know, we're looking at